the Supreme Court is broken, saying that he believes the Supreme Court has made some terrible decisions. That obviously coming in the wake of yesterday's historic ruling by the court that Roe v. Wade is overturned. This was a historic moment, the president describing it as painful and devastating. It was a day that was intended to focus attention, obviously, on what has been historic gun legislation, the first in nearly 30 years. I want to get to Chief White House correspondent Kristen Welker. She is traveling with the president. She's ahead of him now, waiting near the German border, where he will be later in the day at the G7 summit. And Kristen, as you and I reported out yesterday, the White House anticipated this ruling on abortion, but they didn't think it was going to come yesterday. It did sort of interrupt their desire to better celebrate this gun legislation. The president announcing what he plans to do on abortion and saying ultimately it's up to the voters to do more.
You're absolutely right, Peter. The timing of this is just extraordinary. If it weren't for the Supreme Court's decision to overturn Roe v. Wade, the headline today would be this bipartisan gun legislation. But now much of the focus is on the Supreme Court's decision. And that is why President Biden started his remarks by talking about the ruling, calling it devastating, vowing to use the powers of his authority to try to protect reproductive rights for women, but acknowledging that his powers are quite limited. So this is already becoming an issue in the midterms for both parties, quite frankly, Peter. As for that bipartisan gun legislation, the president also touting the fact that this was passed with Republican and Democratic support. It was passed in the wake of those horrific mass shootings in Buffalo and Uvalde. And when he visited those communities, people there demanded that he and Washington do something. The president saying they have now done something. This is really a first step. If you talk to gun safety advocates, they tout the fact that it does do things like expand background checks and provide incentives for states to pass red flag laws, but they would argue it doesn't go far enough. Still, people are celebrating this legislation on both sides of the aisle because, again, it's the first time in more than 30 years that Congress has been able to find common ground on the issue of guns. All of this, Peter, all of this is the backdrop to the president leaving to come here to Germany, where he's going to attend the G7 summit, where he will be addressing other pressing issues on the global stage, from Ukraine to the food shortage. Peter.
Kristen Welker traveling there to Germany, waiting for the president's arrival a little bit later today. She will be traveling with him over the course of the next week. I want to get to NBC's Capitol Hill correspondent now, Ali Vitale. We heard the president say about this gun legislation, Ali, that the Congress has now done something consequential, signed into law today by the president. But I want to get your reaction from your perch at Capitol Hill to what lawmakers have been saying following that ruling yesterday. The Supreme Court obviously seeing a flood of protests. There were emotions on both sides, including emotions from many lawmakers.
Seeing a flood of emotions from lawmakers who felt like yesterday was a roller coaster, frankly, having this euphoric high of passing something finally on guns, the first significant legislation in 30 years, as Kristen mentioned, and then, of course, only hours earlier having this devastating, in the view of many Democratic lawmakers I was talking to, devastating ruling overturning Roe versus Wade. You heard the president speak to that, starting and ending his remarks by talking about the Supreme Court, but speaking in the middle, in a way, talking to the bright spot on this piece of legislation, referencing the families who he has met with who say just do something, after listing, I think, over a dozen of these mass shootings that all of us remember all too well at this moment. So Biden there trying to show that Congress can work. And of course, Peter, you and I covered this. This was the result of weeks of bipartisan legislating and negotiating. There were times when lawmakers inside these negotiations thought that they would fall apart. But of course, this week they finally came together, the Senate and the House passing this bill at the end of the week. Now the president signing it into law.
Yeah, no doubt. A remarkable headline that would have been a lead on the newscast on any other day before the Roe ruling. Ali Vitale, thank you so much. You've been watching an NBC News special report. Some of you will return to Weekend Today. The rest of you will go to regular programming. We'll have a lot more throughout the day on NBCNews.com and tonight on NBC Nightly News. For all of us at NBC News, I'm Peter Alexander.